Won't you give me your hard luck story? I don't care now, you voted for me. I know austerity's breaking your back, but I'm alright, yeah. Don't complain that there's no state housing. I bought mine, made a profit of thousands. There's not many left, but I can't help that. But I'm alright, yeah. I'm alright, yeah. I'm alright, yeah. I'm doing okay, there's no more to say. Everything's going just fine. You're struggling, I know, but even so, I'm sick of hearing you whine. Don't you tell me you can't get a house. I've got two and I'm renting one now. Okay, private landlords are holding you back.
Well, what a great song to lead us into tonight's UBZoomy with our very special guest, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, where we'll be talking about his new Peace and Justice project and many other things. So good evening, Jeremy, and good evening, UB40. And just for the band, because Jeremy, this is the 50th week of doing these sessions, and I still need to remind them to unmute themselves every now and again, including your good self, Jeremy, if you will.
Done.
Good evening.
Done. So they all get long service medals for 50 shows.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Did we all just mouth good evening at everybody?
Just about. So how's things, Jeremy? You've been working all day, I understand.
Fine, thanks. I was just doing an hour with the Media Reform Coalition talking about the power of Murdoch trying to get over our media and the importance of us having genuinely independent investigative journalism in this country, and the way the Tories are trying to take over the BBC. Easy stuff, you know, things like that.
I watched it.
Oh, you watched it? Great. Yeah. You enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. And I enjoyed you getting out of making sure they finished early by telling them you had a date with UB40.
Yeah, they wanted me to go on longer, and I said I couldn't because I had a date with UB40. Yeah. They then hurried it up.
Well, I thought the whole thing was fascinating and just echoes everything that we utterly believe. And it'd be great just to hear you repeat it, you know, or as much as you want of it.
Well, I've got the speech again if you want, but it takes 35 minutes. So when you
brilliant.
Well, we've got a lot of subjects to cover, Jeremy, when it comes to your Peace and Justice project, from climate change to media reform, etc. And we've also got a number of songs to squeeze in as well. I know that you've chosen some songs that are not UB40 related, and you've also chosen a couple that are UB40 related. And we want to talk to you about the apartheid in South Africa and various other things. So a lot to squeeze in. But yeah, maybe if you could at least give us the short version of your 35-minute overview, that'd be pretty good.
Well, the short version is this, that the media is very, very, very powerful, that the newspapers are owned by a small number of companies, commercial radio is owned by a small number of companies, commercial TV is owned by a small number of companies, and the social media platforms in reality are under the control of somebody else. And the media news algorithms send us in the direction that they want us to go by looking at what we click onto, what we watch, what our interests are, and then they send us in those directions. And so some of it's quite funny, actually. I'm of a certain age. I mean, I won't tell you how old I am, but there's a 2 and a 7 in it, and I'm not 27. That means people of a certain age get concerned about certain things. So wherever I go in the country, I turn on my phone. And I remember going to Lowestoft one day, and what came up on my phone through YouTube was, you wouldn't believe how cheap funerals are in Lowestoft.
Oh God! There you go.
So you get this kind of stuff.
I mean, that's never appropriate, is it?
No, it's never appropriate. Who wants to know about the cost of a funeral anyway? It's the one thing you don't expect to be involved with, for yourself, that is. So
Yeah.
it is the way in which these algorithms actually are so very, very powerful. And so the whole point of my talk was that we've actually got to challenge all of that, but also challenge what the BBC is about also, because it is supposed to be public service broadcasting, therefore independent. But unless it has a long-term funding arrangement and a genuine independence about it, it's not going to happen. And so Boris Johnson appoints one of his friends as the chairman of the BBC and another of his friends as Director General of Ofcom. So what have you got?
No chance.
Two of his mates running things. And so if I send in a complaint about my treatment by a particular newspaper, and I've done a bit of that, and that complaint is then heard by Paul Dacre, former editor of the Daily Mail,
What chance?
is it worth the energy putting in a complaint at all?
What
You know
chance
what I
of a
mean?
fair and unbiased hearing?
Absolutely. So it is about that, but it's also about understanding the importance of real journalism. And what I said at the end of it was, well, you heard it, Robin, is the way in which real journalists do risk their lives, are imprisoned, do get killed because they've exposed crooks, crime, drug cartels, military deals, etc. And there was a question also about Julian Assange. And the point I made there was, if Assange had been a spy in the Soviet Union 30 years ago, he'd be treated as a hero and a whistleblower. But because he exposed basically US military stuff around the world, he's treated as a pariah. And my view is he should not be deported, should not be extradited, and should be let out.
Absolutely.
And we go back to the days of what you're talking about seems to not exist anymore. I mean, I remember the days of World in Action, John Pilger, you know, people like that. And that was proper journalism. But who's doing that now? You know,
we remember Paul Foote, great journalist on the Mirror. He did that thing, Who Killed Carl Bridgewater? Carl Bridgewater was this newsboy who was killed in Birmingham. It was sort of seen as, if you like, ordinary murder at the time. There was far more to it. Paul wrote a book about it, and a whole lot of stuff came out. Likewise, those journalists that bravely took up the Birmingham and Guildford cases, it wasn't easy for them. In fact, it was very dangerous. And in those days, you had, as you say, World in Action. You had the Sunday Times Insight team. You had the Daily Mirror as a serious investigative paper with Pilger and others. And all of those things are actually quite expensive. So they've all been cut back on. And it's easier just to do run-of-the-mill, safe entertainment. And so we do need investigative journalists. And I think we don't realize the dangers and the numbers that die around the world for trying to speak out about the truth in Egypt, in Colombia, in Mexico, in India, and so on. And the example I gave was do most people in this country have a clue that 250 million people in India went on strike in support of the farmers?
Yeah.
Not a word about it. 250 million. Was it? It's 1 in 30 of the entire population of the globe.
Yeah.
And it didn't get a mention in most of the British media.
Yeah.
If it had been in America, it would have got a lot of mention.
Yeah. Certainly not on the BBC.
It's actually worse today than it was, say, 30, 40 years ago. It's actually got worse and worse as we've gone on.
A lot worse.
Yeah. Well, that's,
well, it's because of the internet as well. People get their news source on the internet and not necessarily like, legitimate sources that are reliable. And that's one of the major problems in it now. I mean, a lot of kids don't even read newspapers, you know.
I used to do a poll of every meeting I went to, a public meeting in my area, say, hands up those who buy a newspaper. If it was a meeting of predominantly under 30-year-olds, none. If it's 30 to 50, a few. The only place there was a majority was over 60s. Yeah. People just do not buy newspapers. And so the problem with social media news is you tend to log on to the news you want to hear. We all do that.
Yeah.
And that is not good because really you do need to be challenged. You know, we all need to be challenged in what we read. I think I interrupted somebody then because I've got
I was going to say
7 pictures on my screen.
Yeah.
How do you combat that there are only so many newspapers that are clearly being read by the demographic you just mentioned. And then, of course, there are only a few news channels, of course, controlled by a few companies. Then there's the internet, so people have the freedom to go and obtain and absorb their own news wherever they want it. But how on earth do you manage to sort of come up with a way of regulating that, or
But you do find yourself directed onto particular news websites. I mean, the Mail online is the most brilliant one and very well organized. It has 300 million views a month, massive. Yeah. And you'll find that if you click on to almost any story anywhere, you'll suddenly find yourself ending up on the Express or Mail website. And this is part of the problem as to how it's organized. So there has to be a more open, independent way of doing things. And that's part of the project we're doing in the Project for Peace and Justice, working with Media Reform Coalition and all the others, so that we use the debate about the future of the BBC and media in this country as a way of challenging the algorithms that run so much of our social media. Because a lot of people, you go home, switch on their computer and sort of think they're surfing the internet and they're finding out things that they really need to know about. But in reality, they probably don't even realize it. It happens to me. You're being guided in certain directions.
Absolutely.
Guided in particular websites.
You're down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Everyone thinks, like Paul was saying, that excuse me, that it's a neutral form of information, but it isn't. It's as biased as the news programs, because Correct. You're being diverted and made to go places that you wouldn't normally go. I never ever would normally look at the Mail or the Telegraph but if I click online to find out about certain subjects, those are the first places I get taken to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
then
outrageous.
You'll find you're being followed by an algorithm from the Telegraph. They'll follow what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they'll know that you like, I suppose you like buying red shirts. I don't know if you do like buying red shirts, but you might suddenly find yourself inundated with adverts for red shirts.
Yeah.
It's like, and if you share a house with somebody else, like I do with my wife, and she likes handbags and shoes, I find that I'm targeted on my iPhone with the same.
Yeah.
You only have to discuss something, and then all of a sudden, adverts for that thing you were discussing suddenly appear on your internet. It's frightening.
Yeah, as you know, my wife Laura comes from Mexico, and so we go to Mexico when we can. We haven't been for a couple of years, but we do go. So I suddenly find I'm inundated with adverts for apparently very cheap flights to Mexico.
Flights.
When you go onto it, they're not cheap at all. But and that is the power of it. I mean, this stuff is very clever, but also quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Cambridge Analytica is a company that springs to mind. But I think what we should do, guys, is we should play a song, and I think that song should be one of UB40's most recent songs, called Gravy Train, which I know Jeremy are quite fond of. So we'll play that, and I hope that people are listening, not just sing along and sway to it, but listen to the lyrical content. It was written by Jimmy. It's a very interesting song. It's very relevant. We'll play that song and we'll talk about it. But I must mention, for anybody who's watching this on social media streams, then in about, just after the song finishes, the stream will cut, and the only place you'll be able to watch the rest of it is on the UB40 app. So all you need to do is go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, download the UB40 app, which is free, and you'll be able to join us for the rest of the session.
And can we talk about the song afterwards?
Let's do that. Yeah.
Because I've got some questions, Jimmy.
Okay. Good.
Is that all right?
Yeah. It'll give Jimmy a chance to get a better internet signal, I hope, as well. Let's play it, Matt.
It's frozen again.
Miss can't take a tight, call the gravy train. Can't afford to miss this train. Choo choo, I said the train is coming. Choo choo, I said the train is coming.
Another day, another dollar. someone else to ride on that gravy train. And I say, here comes the gravy train. You can hear the whistle blowing round the bend. You can hear the sound of laughing as the gravy train is passing. But that gravy train, it won't be stopping here. They say we're all in this together, but it gets harder every day. And if I work for 100 years or more, I still won't get my seat on that gravy train. And I say, here comes the gravy train. You can hear the whistle blowing round the bend. You can hear the sound of laughing as the gravy train is passing. But that gravy train, it won't be stopping here.
Choo-choo, I said the train is coming. 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 Put on some gambit, put on my suit. Diamond socks with a Chris Clark shoes. Off it all a taxi coming, I miss the train. Missing one time, tell me now miss it again.
Rich man living in his castle, poor man begging at his gate. If we can only get up and stand up for our rights, we could send them all to hell on that gravy train.
Hear that?
Oh yeah, here comes the gravy train. You can hear the whistle blowing round the bend, and the carriages are burning just to keep the wheels a turning. But that gravy train is running out of steam. Here comes the gravy train. You can hear the whistle blowing round the bend. You can hear the sound of laughing as the gravy train is passing. But that gravy train, it won't be stopping here. Here comes the gravy train. You can hear the whistle blowing round the bend.
Choo-choo, choo-choo.
You can hear the sound of laughing as the gravy train is passing. But that gravy train, it won't be stopping here.
One to the left, one to the right, one up front, one in the back, one on go down, 2 times, step on the platform, right time, right place, right line. It coulda rain, it coulda sunshine. Train it a go, 10:45. Now miss the train, not this your time. Choo-choo, I said the train is coming. Choo-choo, I said the train is coming. Choo-choo, I said the train is coming. Choo-choo, choo-choo.
great song. And before we go to Jeremy's questions, I should just remind everybody, if you're watching this on social media streams, then please jump across to the UB40 app, because in the next few seconds, this stream will end.
Sure.
So, Jeremy, if you want to unmute yourself, we'd welcome your questions on that particular song, which I think really encapsulate everything that UB40 is about.
I think it's a brilliant song and I really love it. Question: when you wrote it, were you motivated at all by songs from people such as Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie, as well as, because it has a tone about it of resonance of the songs of the slaves standing up against the slave owners, living in this hope that somehow or other the train is going to come to take them away? And it seems to me there's an awful lot in that song that is just incredible.
I absolutely was heavily influenced by protest songs from that period, and I obviously used the iconography of the train, and obviously the Americana side of that, just to get the message across. So yeah, I was very heavily influenced by those protest songs, Woody Guthrie, people like that, and and the fact that it's a timeless subject, isn't it? It's class war in the end, which is always a subject.
Pete Seeger, I grew up on Pete Seeger. My dad loved Pete Seeger.
Yeah, fantastic, really.
Great songwriter. Great songwriter.
Those songs of Woody Guthrie, that one about in the store, there were rats